Welcome to the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis. Join hosts Aaron Smith and Jimmy Young as they dive into the pulse of the cannabis industry, featuring weekly guests who break down big topics like standardization, evolving regulations, and exclusive member spotlights. Get informed, get inspired. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron and Jimmy.
And welcome back again to another edition of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast. I am Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media TV, and I am so happy to have alongside us is, of course, the executive director of the NCIA, Aaron Smith. But first, we want to thank our supporters and our sponsors, Buds Group's consultants out of the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and of course, the Maverick PR Group out of Colorado. Aaron, take it away.
Thanks, Jimmy. Well, when NCIA founded, back 15 years ago, we had always set out to understand that we were going to represent the whole plant, and that included hemp, that includes any business that kind of touches the cannabis plant. I think over time we've really become a cannabinoid industry more than a cannabis industry, and NCIA represents businesses in the cannabinoid industry across the spectrum, and that includes some of the business members that are here today. We have a lot going on the hemp issue, both in the federal level in Congress, in Texas, and many other states that are going in different directions with hemp cannabinoids. So I am really pleased to welcome the chair of our hemp committee, John Murray from Sustainable Innovations, as well as Cynthia Cabrera from Hometown Hero down in Texas, to really break everything down for us and decide what's going on here. I'd like to hear from them first, I guess, on just what's going on in the hemp world, the corner of the hemp world where you guys are from. And we'll start with John.
Hi, I'm John Murray, and like you said, I am the chair of the Hemp Committee for NCIA, and a couple of years now running, and been on it, I think, for four or 5 years. Really passionate about that. And a little bit of background: I'm out of Illinois, and I'm a vertically integrated cannabis operator as well as a vertically integrated hemp operator. So that's kind of my background in this. Should we do introductions, continue, or do you want me to jump into hemp? Or
let's hear from Cynthia first, and then
Yeah.
we can get into the conversations. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I'm Cynthia Cabrera. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Hometown Hero based in Austin, Texas. I'm also the president of the Texas Hemp Business Council, which has been fighting against SB3 here in Texas.
And you've got the bruises to show, I'm
I
sure,
do.
because it is crazy what's going on in this country right now.
It's nuts.
And again, and Aaron, you've heard me say this, it's the same plant. And when the Farm Bill passed in 2018, where the federal government decided to define hemp as a 0.3% infusion of THC in dry weight, now we've got $2 billion industries fighting amongst themselves. This is not conducive to moving towards normalization, which has really always been my big thing in my world, is that we need to get this plant to be accepted as a plant medicine with other uses. And Aaron, I give you credit because you're coming up with the term. This is a cannabinoid plant. This is not marijuana versus hemp. Accurate?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you can think of hemp as a strain of cannabis. It's the same genus, and there's a maybe arbitrary limit that's put in place by federal law. But I think we have a real opportunity here to move to regulate cannabinoids that are federally legal already, hemp-derived cannabinoids. We should be moving to regulate those at the federal level, and then use that hopefully as the model to regulate all cannabinoids equally, or not equally, but based upon their risk to the user, their intended use, and appropriately, and without being agnostic to what kind of cannabis plant they were derived, these products were derived from.
And John, you're uniquely positioned with both vertically integrated entities on both sides here. And of course, having the role of being the head of the hemp committee for the NCIA helps as well. You and I talked about how can we as those who are pro cannabis plant, find a way to explain and educate to those who are making our laws and regulations how best to handle this all of a sudden huge controversy between the marijuana side and the hemp side.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I think we should consider this almost like an opportunity where I think there's a general consensus to some extent that cannabis is overregulated across the country. Regulations vary state by state. I think there's a sense of overregulation because no one knew what to expect. So everyone went a little aggressive and probably overboard. And then with Farm Bill being passed, and people are calling it loopholes. I think they're just following the law. But regardless, it's opened itself to a whole world of wonderful cannabinoids and a lot of innovation, right? And a lot of innovation has happened on the hemp side because it needs to be creative and innovative. So I think that's helped really push the industry forward as far as cannabinoids in general, and really has because we lost so much time during Prohibition, and I think the hemp industry has really accelerated the growth and the understanding of the cannabis plant in general. But outside of that, there's also a consensus that hemp is underregulated, especially when there's production of intoxicating cannabinoids and cannabinoids where their intended use could be for more recreational type things. So I think we have a real opportunity to come together in the middle and take a look at first, what's working and not working in the cannabis regulation, because there's things that are wonderful about it and there's things that don't make sense at all in practice. And maybe it looked good on paper at one point, but it's just not practical, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So, we can take this as like a 2.0 where we can look at the laws that make sense and the laws that don't, and then really make some changes there, and then bring the unregulated hemp up to that level and create a level playing field, especially for similar type products, right? So that way, there is a level playing field for both industries, and it makes a lot of sense. It protects the consumers and it benefits the plant and exposure and access to the plant in general, across the country.
And Cynthia, you're uniquely qualified because you're in Texas, okay? And Texas, you had 7 cities and towns basically decriminalize the cannabis plant, and yet you still had all these hemp stores open. And then you have your leaders, your lieutenant governor, who I don't want to name names or even say names or call him anything, but I think he's a little disillusioned.
It's like saying Beetlejuice or something.
Yes, 100%. So is there a way for Texas to show the way to get it done? But does it start with the governor's veto of that law that's on his desk right now?
Well, that would be the easiest way to start, is with a veto. Otherwise, we end up back in court. And for those who don't know, Hometown Hero, the company that I work for, filed for an injunction in 2021. And that injunction has kept the entire state of Texas in business. So for the past 4 years, almost 5 years, everyone has been operating off of the same injunction. And to pat Hometown Hero on the back, I wasn't with the company at the time, but to pat Hometown Hero on the back, and because I share the same values that they do, the injunction was not specifically just for Hometown Hero. It was broad, it was all encompassing, and it allowed everyone, including companies from California, Colorado, New York, to be able to sell their products in Texas. Getting a veto from the governor would be a great starting point. The idea, and John, you mentioned something earlier, and it kind of made me laugh a little bit because you said unregulated hemp markets. And it just makes me laugh because I have to pay somebody to stay on top of all the compliance for hemp in all the different states because it's regulated. And they're all different. None of them are the same. And it's just a massive time and money suck. But, the fight in Texas was very interesting in that the lieutenant governor, Beetlejuice, and the senator who came up with it basically said, we will not expand the medical marijuana program unless we get this ban. And all the medical marijuana operators, all three of them, one of whom has 70% of the market, that's Texas Originals, they all advocated for that. And so we were talking about this before the podcast started. We were talking about what is the way around this? How do you do this? And we had conversations with the medical marijuana folks, and it was like, let us help you get the program expanded. And the response was, no, your industry just has to die. So you get a conservative state like Texas, and then you get people that come out and just lie. And, the idea, and I talk about this all the time because it's everybody's favorite word. Oh, but the synthetic cannabinoids. Well, synthetic cannabinoids are illegal. They've been illegal for like 15 years or something. If you find somebody selling synthetic cannabinoids, JW compounds, by all means, have them arrested. And all they are just false narratives. And so I think it's CABA, C-A-B-A. I'm not super familiar with them, but they testified at one of the hearings and they were like, oh no, we're good with a carve out just for beverages. Yeah, that's totally. So everybody started carving out their own, or trying anyway, to carve out their own little industry despite pleas and offers to work together because this is a very big, very conservative state. And so nobody got anything. And, part of me is, the Schadenfreude part of me is like, good. That's what happens when you don't work together. And that's what's going to happen in the rest of the country if people don't get their shit together.
Right. I agreed 100%. Aaron, I know you have a bunch of topics. Go ahead.
There's a lot of head nodding going on there.
Right. That's right. I wish we could educate the people who are making the rules and the laws about what the real issues are here. And again, Aaron, you follow the money, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think to John's point, we really need to see this as an opportunity that, some people think Congress did this as an accident. And I'm not going to speak for Congress, whether it was, an accident or not, if it was, we should seize upon it as a happy accident. And this is an opportunity. We have legal THC at the federal level, this opportunity to show how we can regulate these products. And, imagine we regulate hemp-derived THC. Yeah, because it's a lot easier to do that in Congress when it's already legal than to say, oh, let's legalize marijuana from scratch. Well, then the argument shifts to, well, why don't we just legalize the rest of the THC? It's the same exact bioidentical molecule. And so it could create that's how NCIA sees it, is this could be a model for cannabinoid regulation, intoxicating or otherwise, that we should be seizing upon.
Right. And wasn't the original movement for the Farm Bill and to allow states to understand to actually open up a decriminalized industry of cannabis in their own states for medicinal purposes? Pretty sure most states went decriminalizing first before they went to adult use legal. And to me, decriminalization needs to happen for this plant. Period. I don't care how much percentage of THC is in it. Can we just decriminalize the plant and now regulate it sensibly? Sounds fair.
And it's creating a safer alternative to alcohol in places where, there's places like Texas, for example, where there isn't a dispensary where an adult can walk in over 21 to buy marijuana products like they can where I am here in Colorado. But these products being available as a safer alternative to alcohol, and if even very small percentage of alcohol users, substitute cannabinoid products for alcohol, that's huge public health benefits for the country, not to mention for the individuals, and less tragedy in families because of the damage alcoholism does to communities versus cannabis. It's exponentially different.
John, you're uniquely positioned for this. Again, how do you handle this? Where do we go? Where do we go? What's the best place to start? Is there I'll tell you what, everybody agrees this is an over 21 product, and anybody who's selling either of these all of these derivatives are out there. Everybody should get the idea that the convenience stores, the gas stations, the liquor stores, everybody has to ask, what's your ID? Show me your ID. Isn't that the most basic thing both sides agree to, John?
You would think that, but no, my experience, certainly in the state here, and in other states that I've participated in, it's actually quite the opposite. Hemp understands that it needs to be regulated. Hemp has been pushing for a long time for common sense, safety items like age gating, like proper packaging and labeling standards, not appealing to kids, COAs, the various the things that can make it safe for consumers, right? And to protect children. And you would think that that would be a no-brainer that, everyone should pass that. But that's not the case at all because unfortunately it's turned into this polarized, side hemp versus THC versus cannabis rather. And, cannabis would either wants to own it or ban it. And because there's this false belief that hemp is cannibalizing the cannabis sales or marijuana sales to the point where one industry has to go away in order to build the other industry up. And I've seen in practice, because I have stores on both sides, that they actually work very synergistically, and there's just a completely different customer base. And in fact, I would argue that on the hemp side, the hemp can produce customers that can then go over to the cannabis side and to the marijuana side because of the kind of curious folks and the folks that need a little bit more education, that want a variety of products and want to understand what all this new cannabis and marijuana offerings are versus going to a more rigid environment that most dispensaries are. I know in my state, they're like glorified will calls where you have to know what you're ordering in advance. You go in, it's not very consumer friendly. You get shuffled to a line, you get handed a stapled brown paper bag in some cases, and you go and you're not even allowed to open the bag when you're inside to even see what you purchased until you're in the parking lot. Like that's not a happy consumer experience, right? Versus a hemp store where people can talk and explore and understand the different types of products that are out there, the different delivery mechanisms, whether that's smoking or oils or edibles or tinctures. There's such a variety of delivery platforms out there. So yeah, I think that's the kind of the crux of where there's a difference is that cannabis has not wanted and has really prohibited and shot down and lobbied against any type of hemp regulation other than hemp regulation that disguises itself and states that it's regulation, but it's actually bans. And the people in the hemp industry know it's a ban, but they're convincing the legislators that, oh, this is going to regulate it properly, right? So at least in my state and the other states that I've assisted some of these battles in, that's what I've found.
Texas, Cynthia?
Is there a question?
Oh, I just want you to comment on everything you said because
I mean,
Well, I'll give you an interesting hypocritical thing in Texas. So one of the things that Lieutenant Governor Beetlejuice kept going on about was underage access, which we pushed for in 2 different sessions, and he did not support at all. But in Texas, you can buy a minor a drink. As long as the adult is okay with it and the bar is okay with it, you can buy a minor a drink. That's on the books. So there is a large piece of hypocrisy there. There's also set aside the rivalry between, and I will say, and I couldn't possibly have more haters than I have right now. So I'm fine saying that a lot of the marijuana, unhappiness is just kind of like a sense of entitlement or a boohoo or just not wanting to change with the times. Nothing stays the same. And people had an idea that when marijuana made it to the market, it was going to look a certain way. And they were unprepared for hemp, right? And then they didn't know what to do about it. And they're like, well, this just needs to go away because I had an idea in my mind of what this would look like. And this doesn't match that. But so aside from the marijuana rivalry, there's also an interesting situation in Texas. The beer folks, Aaron, you mentioned that, drinking is on its way down, I think you said, and it is. Beer sales are down. The beer folks in Texas, rather than embrace a new revenue stream, they were like, no, we need to shut this thing down, which is fascinating. They've done things the same way for 100 years. And the idea of a new product, a non-alcohol based product that customers want, they just couldn't wrap their arms around it. And so we had a situation where the package store, here they call them package stores, liquor stores. The liquor stores were like, yeah, we'll carry the beverages. And then they tried to get a carve out for themselves. The beer guys were like, no, just ban the whole thing because we want people drinking beer because that's what we're used to. And it goes through the 3-tier system and all this other stuff. And it seems to me that people just don't know how to adapt. And even though marijuana legalization is fairly new in the states where it's been legalized, it's still federally illegal, but it's been legalized in some states, and people just can't roll with it. And I used to say all the time when I bothered to engage with folks about it, I'd say, if you support destroying the hemp industry, which is open to you. So in Texas, there are 3 license holders for medical marijuana. Nobody here is getting another medical marijuana license, right? There's a backlog of 100 of them, but anybody can open up a hemp store or a manufacturing operation, assuming that they have the money for the licenses and they pass the inspections and all that other stuff. So the marijuana side is elitist and the hemp side is egalitarian because the same opportunity exists for everyone on the hemp side. So the only solution that I see to this situation is that people have to just set aside their preconceived notions of what it's supposed to look like and be willing to explore what can actually be. It's like when I worked in the vape space. I used to work for the largest vape organization in the country. And then I went back to consulting work, and I had some cigarette companies that were my clients. And it was so hard for them to envision the world being any different than it was right now. At that time, they just could not envision. So, we talk about imposing a milligram cap. We talk about where they should be sold. We're already putting in restrictions and requirements and all of this, as opposed to saying, well, what can be? Why does this industry voluntarily restrict itself? In Texas, we had an organization that panicked and 2 months before the end of session was running around the Capitol offering up concessions that nobody had asked for. And it just showed a lot of fracture and a lot of fear and lack of unity. And in the end, everybody got shot in the foot.
And who loves this? The legacy market, right, people?
Absolutely.
Right? They're thriving. They're thriving, and they're not getting taxed, and they're not getting regulated, and it's not being tested. So this goes to human behavior in so many ways, doesn't it? That people are just more interested in taking care of themselves and making money for themselves and making as much money as possible, rather than looking at the pie and separating it in equal slices, which is really egalitarian. Isn't that right, Cynthia? I mean, is that the idea here?
Yeah, what it is egalitarian. And what I don't understand, and somebody said to me once, it was a law professor at UT. We had dinner one night a few months ago, and he said, I don't understand why your company advocates for everybody. He's like, why don't you guys just carve up a slice for yourselves and call it a day? He's like, you spend so much money and so much time. He's like, you never take vacation. Why don't you do that? And it's like, because we don't have a problem competing on the field. May the best product win, may the best marketing win. And there are a lot of people who don't want to compete. And I always tell people, if you get rid of the little operators first, you get rid of hemp, pretty soon you're next. All the little companies are going to be next. And the only thing you're going to be left with are the behemoths and the black market.
That's right. And we're moving.
I'd say that I take a little softer approach to the marijuana side than Cynthia for sure. And I wear both hats. Is that, there's a legitimate.
Listen, one day I will abuse you the way they've abused me, and then we'll see.
Well, there's a legitimate reason to be frustrated that there's unfairness. The marijuana industry is saddled with 280E, over regulation, over at the state level, over taxation at the state level in most places. But the answer is not to drag the hemp side down into that. The answer is to rise up the marijuana side, less regulation on the marijuana side, more, relief on the federal front. Probably, yes, more regulation on the hemp side too, to bring in that parity. And so what, the NCIA's position is that we still need parity, but that doesn't mean going backwards into prohibition like what's happening. And maybe we'll get to what's happening in Congress next, Jimmy. But that in Congress, there's been multiple attempts, including one underway as we speak, to try to put the genie back in the bottle here. And we're gonna be fighting tooth and nail to keep that from happening.
And of course, Aaron's referring to the States Act. We had Dina Titus on our last episode, one of the co-sponsors of that, along with Dave Joyce out of Ohio. And in that bill, it does talk about one regulatory industry, and it is the alcohol tax, tobacco tax. It's the TTB, alcohol tax, right? A trade. There's a trade in there too. There's a T for trade. Cynthia, you're laughing at me, which is okay. I don't mind.
I'm not laughing at you. I was thinking that earlier today I had the same trouble remembering the whole name.
I mean, we all know who the DEA is, FDA, USAG, and then all of a sudden I've got the TTB to deal with, right? I think that's how it is. John, as someone who can speak to that, have you looked at the States Act? Have you read it to see, does this make sense for both sides of the industry? That's my question.
Are you talking about the appropriations bill currently in the remake of the Mary Miller with kind of the industrial hemp carve out?
Aaron, there's a difference.
Well, I actually started kind of alluding to that, but I wasn't specific. But Jimmy, you're asking about the States Act, which is legislation that seeks to regulate all cannabinoids as NCIA sees should happen, and put these products under TTB where alcohol and tobacco are.
And aren't we seeing the alcohol industry starting to invest in the cannabis space, at least a little bit here? John, yes?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, especially in this state and others. Yeah. I mean, the alcohol industry, as it's been alluded to, sales are down, right? So you could take the approach like Cynthia mentioned in Texas, where it's like, well, we want to see alcohol sales continue, so we want to ban everything else and give people no alternatives, which is insane. Or, the alcohol industry can say, well, times are changing and there's some viable products that are entering the market. Let's be part of it because, by the way, we have a huge advantage because we have long-term lobby. We have some of the strongest lobbyists in the country, right? Is the alcohol industry for sure, right? And then what do they have? They have a distribution system to handle the logistics and distribution of alcohol, which is liquid, which is, bottles. I mean, this is hard to move. This is heavy, and you start having pallets and pallets and pallets of cans and bottles and things. I mean, that's a whole different ball game. Cannabis isn't set up for that, right? And alcohol has this time-tested framework, right? That's this three-tier system. They have distributors that they have it figured out. Why wouldn't we embrace them? Why wouldn't they embrace us and say, look, THC drinks, cannabinoid drinks are here to stay. They're the thing of the future, and the public demands them, right? Like they're wanted. Let's embrace that and think about consumers, right? Right? Let's put money second, consumers first. How do we service consumers and get them the products that they want and need, right? So for some, it's recreational. For others, it's therapeutic, right? So like, well, let's provide this access on a infrastructure and framework that exists already.
Cynthia,
I have a question. Yeah, for you, John. I have a question. So the alcohol, the beer distribution framework, for example, and we have like 12 lobbyists. Three of them are former alcohol lobbyists. Two were beer, and one was for the package stores. So my question for you is this: it sounds good, but what do you say to the people who will not have their products carried by the beer distributors, who can't afford the fees that the beer distributors charge? There's no way that beer distros are going to carry every product that's currently being sold right now. And people are marketing their products and they're moving them, some through the mail, some have set up their own distribution systems. But how do you address all the people who would actually be out of business or wouldn't be able to compete? Because I mean, I looked it up one day and like the four big alcohol brands own like 800 companies own like 800 brands. So where is the opportunity for the people and it's the same thing for, and I get it because, marijuana people say the same thing. Well, I built this business. The difference is, or the similarity is that they're both restrictive. And so again, I go back to what else is there? What else can there be? And I forgot who said it earlier, but people know how to age gate in a gas station or a tobacco store or whatever. They know how to ask for an ID. So if people wanted to participate in the beer distribution, the three-tier system, great. But if they didn't want to, then what?
Okay, so there was probably a lot of questions in there, maybe.
Just one.
But okay, so the system's already set up, and I think for even your small retail store, it just really requires them getting a liquor license of some variety, and that varies state by state. Some are worth some you can do beer and wine, others hard alcohol, etc., whatever the state is, but there's typically a license and a fee for that. And then past that, there's a distributor that's set up, and like I think that that's not an unobtainable.
No, not the licensing part, the part where there are thousands or hundreds of brands on the market that the beer distributors are not going to be able to carry all of them. So
Well, I mean,
what's going to happen to those?
isn't that kind of fair market? I mean, there's
Yeah,
that's
I'm just
that's
asking.
self-regulating it. I mean, like you're asking me like, well, so how do they make a choice between beer and alcohol brands right now? Because there's thousands of those. I mean, it's like at some
But
point,
that's my point. They own I looked it up. They own most of them. And so, but this is my point with the marijuana side, right? This is my point with the marijuana side is that they're in this small, regulated, overly regulated system that doesn't work for them. They can't make any money. It's very difficult, right? We're talking about alcohol taking over drinks, which is also a very regulated system that only benefits a few people, right? So I'm just wondering what you think about that.
well, I mean, life isn't fair, right?
I know
At
that.
the end of the
Listen,
day,
I know
but
that
you
more
know,
than most people.
and you want to know, I think at the end of the day, doesn't BlackRock own pretty much everything? So it's
Sure.
one company at the end of the day anyway. But outside of that, I, yeah, I don't think there's. I'm just looking at it from a practicality standpoint, from, furthering access, safe access for the plant in general, the cannabis as a species. And, I think that can be obtained by using the infrastructure and framework that exists, which to move beverages, really, the cannabis market's not set up for that. You or
Totally
I
agree.
aren't going to go down to a cannabis dispensary and like, hey, let's go get a six pack, the THC drinks. It's just not, they're not set up for it. We're not, consumers aren't thinking that way. They're used to going to a gas station or a grocery store, right? I mean, and so they want to, so we need to be mindful of how consumers are used to buying things already and stick with that. And then, maybe there's some more licenses for distributors that can come out. So there can be some hemp operators, but it's not every hemp operator and not every single store is going to get a winning ticket for everything. That's not how life works. That's not how any industry across the board works across the world, right? I mean, that's just not how life works. So I feel for everyone, but like there's everyone has to do the best they can with the resources they have. But like at the end of the day, consumers need access to the products that they want and need, right? And so that's what I think the focus should be, um, primarily, at least in my head. So I understand what you're saying. I
No,
really do.
listen, I agree with you. Life is not fair. And, people have to roll with the punches. Everybody's not going to win. And I think that that is the message that needs to be given to the marijuana side, which is, hey, this thing changed. Just like people, I mean, Specs and Total Wine and all these liquor stores, they all carry THC beverages. I don't know how they're getting them because they're not getting them through beer distributors. So I'm not sure where they're getting them, but they all have them. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that concessions have to be made, but people have to be realistic about them, right? And so the idea that marijuana can be fixed, the regulatory framework can be fixed, and at the same time, crap all over the hemp side because people don't like it and it's different and they didn't adapt to it. I mean, I give Cheech and Chong a lot of props. They were in marijuana, saw the possibilities in hemp, and then made the crossover to hemp. And like, good for them. They play on both sides wherever they can, and they don't complain about it. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all your points. They're very fair, and I mean they hit closer to home than you realize, right? I mean, I get it, but like, you just have to move on sometime, right? And do the best you can and promote your brand as much as possible and hope that you're one of the winners, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not, then you can be and there's various degrees of winning, right? Like not everyone is going to be the Anheuser-Busch of hemp drinks. I mean, there's plenty of small local, craft brewers and stuff that some of them may never get bigger than the town that they're in, right? That's it. Like they brew locally right there and they sell, 10,000 beers a year to the local customers that love it, and that's as big as they get. And other folks are, get international distribution. I can't control that, right? No one can, right? So I think there's various degrees of success for any product, and it's the opportunity, it's the access to the opportunity, and we haven't touched on social equity yet, but like especially in states where there's limited licenses, like Texas, like Illinois, there's this is a way where the barrier to entry is significantly lower, right, or even obtainable in our case, right? But it's significantly lower to be able to open up any of these hemp stores, to be able to make hemp products, etc. And that's kind of some social justice for these social equity folks that really have no other means possibly of achieving social justice, right? Social justice isn't, hey, I'm going to go get hired by an MSO for $20 an hour. That's not social justice, right? It's that ownership, where you have a possibility to create your one town brand into possibly a national brand and do wonderful things. It's that ability and opportunity to do it, not necessarily that everyone wins. It's just having that freedom and the ability to even start and play in that game.
Right. You mentioned social equity, John, and I know that you've got something to do with that as well. And when you think about the beginning of all this, the idea was to legitimize the concept of growing this plant and using it either medicinally or for adult use. I don't even like the word recreational because I've used it as a medicine for a long time. But even before it was legal and before I had my medical card. Okay. And by the way, it was a lot easier to find the guy around the corner and in the parking lot than it is now to figure out the right thing to do to legitimize it. Okay. That being said, we were less discerning back then too. But the social equity applicant is not, it's so difficult for them to make it. And now there are laws out there that are basically saying that you can't move forward because you don't have the money, you don't have the backing, and then they're getting taken advantage of. Oh my God, what a shock that people are taking advantage of other people. I mean, the human element to this debate is the biggest issue for me, because you have to get away from what's in it for me instead of what's in it for them. How can we help them out or others out? We have to take that focus, and that's asking humans a lot, right? Because it's always, what about me? What about me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? That is how we all kind of operate. But you have the most regulated product right now, overregulated, overtaxed. And then, John, we talked about this at the beginning before we even started recording. And then you've got the underregulated on the other side, and it's the same plant. There has to be a way to make this work with reasonable people in the same room making these laws and regulations. There's plenty. The pie is big enough. This is what I keep telling people. The pie is big enough. Just don't be greedy about it. Who's holding this up? Is it the people with the money, with the most money, or is it the politicians who are just trying to get rid of it? It's a unnecessary evil we need to just get rid of. That's a lot of the mentality that was faced for years. Where do we go, guys? Where are we going? Aaron,
I have a question for you now.
Go ahead.
Give me an example of the underregulation you're talking about.
Underregulation of hemp products?
You said one side is overregulated and one side is underregulated.
Marijuana side. I don't even like using the M word, but yeah. So hemp, because you can get these products inside other stores that are not licensed stores to sell THC infused products. That's an underregulated, as far as I'm concerned. Okay.
What state is that?
Take your pick. There's 24. No, all right. Hang on a second. Hang on. You see these products, John, you have them in Illinois, do you not? Don't you have a mix of both in Illinois?
Yes, I mean, yes, absolutely. And I think by underregulation, Cynthia, it's simply talking about in a state where both exist, right? Like the cannabis side is very regulated. You have to go to a dispensary. There's track and trace. There's cameras. There's guys with ARs. I mean, like it's quite a system, right? I mean, it's systematized, very, very comprehensive state audits, cameras, the whole nine yards. And then you have, Bob's Smoke Shop, right? Who, according to the law, since hemp isn't regulated necessarily, because Illinois doesn't have a hemp specific legislation. So it falls back to the federal, which is the Farm Bill, which really doesn't say that Bob's Smoke Shop can't sell this a 2-gram Delta 9 vape to little Johnny who's 14. There's no law prohibiting him from do that. Now, ethically, morally, there should be, right? like the owner of the smokes, Bob should never allow that. We voluntarily age gate. We practice and we voluntarily subjugate ourselves to the regulation that we're pushing that we want. We're already there, right? We already test our product. We already label it properly. We already do all these things. That would be an underregulation compared to the same product in many cases, right? If you have THCA flower that's hemp and THCA flower that's cannabis, on the cannabis side, there's potency testing. There's testing for toxins and heavy metals and all this stuff. And there's potency tests and COAs, and it's very heavily regulated for it to get from farm to consumer. On the hemp side, no, you could order it from out of state. You could pick it up from your dealer across the street. They're so by comparison, the hemp side is really underregulated when you're exposed to a regulated market for the same plant, for the same product. Is it better?
My response to that would be that the overregulation on the marijuana side is because everybody is still dealing with federal illegality. So they went overboard with regulation because it's federally illegal, which is stupid. But that's why everybody went overboard. But I will vehemently disagree with you on the lack of regulation. And I'll use Illinois as an example. We don't sell in Illinois. That's not one of our states. We generally don't sell in states that have recreational marijuana because it's not worth it. But Illinois has been trying, or certain entities in Illinois have been trying to kill the hemp market for years. So the inability to reach or achieve reasonable and good hemp regulations is because people have been trying to kill the industry instead. So the hemp industry has to fight for its survival versus working with the other side to make sure that those regulations get in place. But I will tell you that there are dozens of states that require testing, registration, inspections, COAs, you name it. And this is why I have to pay a compliance person, because we have to keep up with all of this. So in Texas, there is no age gate. They put in really comprehensive regs in 2019, which require all the things I just mentioned, but they didn't put in an age gate. But to your point, John, good actors, which is the majority of people, will just age verify people on their own. So in the places where there is a lack of regulation, and that's not most places, most hemp operators don't even bother with recreational marijuana states. Sorry to use the word recreational, adult use states. They don't bother with it because it's not worth it. But there are plenty, and this is a thing that just gets me like super vexed, because the idea that there is, I mean, I spend all day dealing with regulation. I have folders for every single state that we sell into and the compliance levels that we have to meet. Testing is different in every single state. Labeling is different in every single state. We actually have to achieve a higher level of purity and quality in order to be able to sell across different states. So I take a little bit of umbrage when I hear that it's underregulated, because come and spend a couple of days with me in my office and join my hell and see how underregulated you think.
How about in comparison to?
Yeah.
In comparison, but that doesn't mean it's not regulated. It means marijuana is overregulated.
Well, no, that's why the term was underregulated in comparison to marijuana, which is overregulated.
It gives the idea, yes. I mean, listen, I sat through months of hearings where people said, these products aren't regulated. And I'm like, holy moly. Like,
I would agree they are regulated, but do you think that not being age gated in Texas would be an underregulation? I would argue that.
We pushed for it for 2 sessions.
But that's not the question.
Well, your question is that an underregulation? Is that the question?
Yeah, it is being able to sell to a minor an underregulation for an intoxicating adult use THC derived product in Texas. Would you want your daughter or son who's 8 years old going in and getting a 500 milligram gummy of hemp derived Delta 9, even though it's past all the any regulation that's on there for the COAs, the potency? It's been verified that it is a clean 500 milligrams, right? Guaranteed.
First of all, I mean, I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, even once I hit 18 or 21, whatever the thing was. So, but your point about the 8-year-old or the 5-year-old, I'm dying to meet this 8-year-old that walks into a gas station and buys this, because I hear about him all the time, but nobody has ever pointed him out to me. I've never seen a receipt. I've never seen a thing. To your point, I do think it is a lack of regulation, which is why we have pushed for it. But that doesn't mean that we are not regulated. Okay.
Under-regulation was the word, not.
But my point is that it gives the impression that there is no regulation. So when you say underregulated, how do people know what you're referring to? If you say, well, we really need to have that age gate, that's way more specific.
Agreed. But if we were talking about lack of regulation, we would just say lack or not regulated, which was
I don't know what you would say.
Yeah. Well, the legacy market worked really well for about 100 years in this country. When I say really well, no one had these problems when it was totally unregulated, totally unlawful. I mean, it was just there, it was used by people who enjoyed.
And how did people get it?
We knew somebody.
Well, I mean, that's what the
I know a guy.
You know a guy? There's a commercial like that now, right? I don't want to get into that, but yeah. So, and Aaron, I know you have a couple other things on your sheet, but this was a great discussion, guys. You two, Aaron, great job picking these two out, because
I like this guy.
there's just, there's so much to talk about. And here it is. We're both in, you guys are in the trenches. You're both in the industry. And John, you wear two hats. I don't even know how you do that, but you do. Okay. And Aaron, I feel bad for you because you're trying to do the right thing for both industries. And you're getting vilified for it. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think that there's a path forward for both industries, and I hate to hear this, this concern on the marijuana side that there's this huge threat from hemp. Frankly, the threat is that there's a huge industry out there that's sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what the politicians are going to do that's going to affect their business. They're not invested in cannabis reform, they're not invested in NCIA, they're not invested in any of the other groups. They're just sitting there kind of hoping, well, I've bet my whole life savings on this marijuana business that violates federal law, and I'm going to sit back and hope that NCIA or somebody gets these laws changed. That's crazy to me. And that's frankly, just get preachy here, but that's the big threat to the marijuana industry is that it's sitting back on its, with the exception of the few that are part of NCIA and part of the other groups. I will say if you're part of any group that's working at changing federal law, then you're doing the right thing, but that's less than 1%. So that's what I think we need to work together. And, the hemp industry has been quite politically active. And I think, we need to join forces to finally regulate the whole cannabinoid ecosystem out there. And these products, I think there's a place for them in both hemp and marijuana. And there's a place for them.
Right. And most importantly, people, when I hear stories about 8-year-olds or I want to, the parents have to be the ones that educate. Parenting is by far the toughest job any of us ever have. Okay. And giving the parents the education that they need about these products is probably the most important thing that we can do as an industry. Because when I get my skin crawls when I hear about a young person going to school with THC edibles and sharing it with their peers in school, and everybody goes to the hospital because they're sick. That the parents should be arrested. Excuse me. The parents should be fined. Okay, let's just make it fined rather than arrested. Okay, but they have to understand the power of these products and how easy it is to overdo it. We're all, I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, the drinking age was 18. And we actually had to learn how to self-medicate ourselves with alcohol to understand what our limits were. Okay, the same, and this was before MAD. Okay, this was before Mothers Against Drunk Driving, certainly before DARE. Okay, let's just say. So we really had to experiment with each other. And I couldn't drink more than 3 beers, and I used to get crap from my friends because of it. Then I find out in my 30s, I'm allergic to hops. No wonder I couldn't drink 3 beers, right? And so, but my point is, it's an experiment. There's going to be pits and there's going to be peaks and valleys to this regulatory. We can't just do this by snapping our fingers. We're in a whole new world here. It's a whole new world of weed. I use that all the time. We have to learn how to learn about it and consume responsibly. And that, to me, is what we like to do here in these open forums. And you guys were awesome. Both of you, terrific. Aaron, I give you credit. I applauded you for being a little late to this show, but you made up for it by getting these two here because you did a great job of booking these two guests. So I thank you. I'm going to wrap this up unless do you want to have one last thought, John, or one last thought, Cynthia? I got no problem with that. You guys were so good.
I have a thought for Aaron.
Go ahead.
So this legislative session in Texas, was a total shit show. And I mean, people who had been, lobbyists for 30 years are like, I quit. Like they're just so disgusted with how, the arm twisting and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is that people let politics dictate rather than policy. And that's what you're facing. People are letting their politics take over rather than embracing good policy. And that is unfortunate.
Right. John?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you can see when you're looking at some hemp folks, there's a lot of passion. Well, there's a lot of passion in our industry, and could you imagine if our industry, instead of trying to kill the other side, would actually combine resources and try to figure it out together, what that market could possibly look like. And, boy, consumers would win at that point, right? I mean, like our world would win at that point,
That's
right?
right.
Just to have safe and effective access, for everyone, whether they're using it for adult use, regardless of the intended use, right? Just to be able to have that level playing field across the board and to have sensible regulation on all sides, right? If it's like product, it should be regulated the same, right? I mean, it just makes sense.
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely does. Aaron, I know you have to have at least one or two last thoughts, or should I just wrap it up?
Well, I'll just wrap with, that we do have some, piece of legislation that's hanging out there in Congress right now that's seeking to, roll back the Farm Bill and bring us back to criminalization. And I want to encourage the listeners that want to push back against prohibition to join NCIA to help support our lobbying efforts, but also to visit thecannabisindustry.org and take action and send an email to your member of Congress. There's a very easy little widget to make that very easy for you to do. Send an email to your member of Congress today, letting them know that we need regulation, not prohibition.
Right. And I did that already, Aaron. Okay, so I get to go to the front of the class or ahead of the class or whatever you want to, wherever you want to put me. But John Murray and Cynthia Cabrera, you guys were awesome. I so enjoyed listening to you. And I can tell you, I've done talk shows for 40 years, and the best shows when the talk show host doesn't have to say a thing. And you guys were great. It really was interesting to listen to, and that's really the best kind of content you can produce. So for Aaron Smith, for Cynthia and John, I'm Jimmy Young. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, repost, and all that neat stuff online. This has been the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast, and it wouldn't be possible without the support of Buds Group, a consulting group out of the tri-state area, and also Maverick Public Relations. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We focus solely on the cannabis space. The cannabis is not just another item that we've put on our website and said, oh, we're in cannabis. We do cannabis and cannabis only, and we focus on cannabis day in and day out. So with Buds Group, we're going to not only work with you and give you advice, we're going to help see your project through to completion. And you're going to find at the end of the day, it'll be a fraction of a cost of working with a larger firm, because our executives are focused just on cannabis and we run lean.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
That's a wrap on this episode of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis. If you liked what you heard, smash that like and subscribe button, follow us on your favorite platform, and share this episode with your network. We've got more industry movers, shakers, and game changers coming your way every week. So don't miss a beat. Tune in next time for another fresh episode with Aaron and Jimmy.